This is Julie with SteamCat, and today we're going to talk about making your own buckram. Yes, this is possible. Now, I use buckram in a lot of my fascinators, and I'm always looking for either alternatives to buckram or something that I don't have to order in. And you know what? We're stuck indoors during a pandemic, so why not try to make something? Can I do it? We'll find out. But first, what is buckram? Buckram is a heavy cotton or linen fabric that's been stiffened with starch or gum, and it can be moistened with either steam or water and molded into shapes, or it can be used as is and cut into sheets or flat shapes. And it's often used for hat bases and as a stiff interfacing. Now, linen buckram is often used to make corsets, and what I have here is a roll of craft buckram. I bought this stuff, it's about 23 inches wide. I bought this stuff when my local Hancock went out of business. But this stuff, I'll show you a smaller piece. It's kind of floppy. Buckram is a good interfacing. If you know what interfacing is, it's the stuff that you put in lapels in a jacket or wherever you want a little bit of body for your stuff. I have a couple of ones I can show you. This is a fusible interfacing. It's a Pellon 808, and it's lightweight, so it's not very stiff, but if you've got some shirt cuffs or lapels or something that you just want a little body for, this stuff is really perfect. You can also get this in a sew-in, and this is some of the stiffest interfacing you can buy, and I'm playing with this as a hat alternative. This is Decoville 526. It's also from Pellon, and they call it Leather-like Fusible Stabilizer. So you can use this maybe in hats, we're going to find out, but handbags, anything that you want more body to. You see this? It's kind of like leather. It's stiff and it's got a lot of body to it. So there are a lot of guides out there to choosing the kind of stabilizer and interfacing you want. So we're not going to go into that. But we're going to talk about starches for a minute. Most starches are plant-based. You are familiar with good old cornstarch. This is store brand, as you can see, and you're probably familiar with potato or rice starch, and a lot of you have probably used this, or even flour, which contains a lot of starch, to make a paste with. And that's kind of the same process, really. You might use it for paper mache. Now, so unless they're being mixed with something toxic, these things are, they can be consumed. So if you're worried, if you have children or pets around, as long as you're using them with water, you don't have a problem with it. This is what I'm using today. It's called xanthan gum. As you can see, it says blend into gluten-free flours for tender baked goods. It basically gives your flour, a little body, or, the springiness if you're used to working with gluten-based flour. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you have to eat gluten-free, and I know people who have to, and it's not fun, you can use things like xanthan gum to make your baked goods, more like you're used to having, which is really a good thing to have. Xanthan gum is corn-based, and it's made by a chemical process. There's also another kind called gum tragathon that has been around for a very long time, and if you're wanting to do a historical reenactment, you want gum tragathon. So, I'm using the xanthan gum, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the process of making these. I'll provide the recipes below, but I'll talk about them for a moment. I'm using a cup of water. For cornstarch, you put 4 tablespoons in a cup. The normal mix for this is a half teaspoon, to a cup of water, but I doubled this up because I wasn't happy with what I got before, and I will show you that in a minute. But because I'm looking at making hats now, the regular mix is probably fine for clothing interfacing, but we're going to see what we get with this. Okay, so the next thing you need is some fabric, and let me go get my fabric for you. This is a thread. Well, this is a heavy cotton twill, and it's 100% cotton. And I've found in my experimentations that I've done so far that the heavier fabric you work with, the more likely you're able to come up with a heavier buckram. That's not always the case. It's going to depend on the paste you're using. So you want your fabric, you want a cover. I'm just using a trash can bag, and you want some gloves and a paintbrush. So let me put my gloves on here. And basically, when you mix this xanthan gum up, you want it to let it sit for at least 5 minutes. This has probably been sitting for 15 minutes. And one thing I've noticed is the lumps in it, it's okay to have these lumps in it, but the longer you let it sit, the more the lumps will get absorbed into your liquid. So you'll come up with something maybe a little bit thicker, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So, we mixed up the stiffeners, and I just used a fork, as you can see, an old fork. Doesn't matter because this is food safe. Now, you want a natural bristle brush. That's the best thing to use. I buy the cheap craft brushes. So what we're going to do is just paint your fabric. This takes a while. Now, I'm using 12-inch pieces of fabric because 12 inches is about the size I want to use on the hat form that I'll show you in a minute. Because the plan here is to have several pieces of buckram that I can work with and put on hat forms, and we can see what the finished product looks like. Because, you have to experiment and see what works best, and that's what I'm doing today. So I'm just going to be quiet and finish this, and we'll run it double or triple time. Okay? Okay, I'm finished. So I've done this on both sides, and when you coat this, you want to be really generous with your coating, because even though it's going to take a while to dry, you want a good stiff buckram. For hats at least, you want a good stiff buckram. So let me stop again and put this stuff aside. Okay, there are a couple of ways to dry this. The traditional method is just to put it outside, and I live in Texas, and in the summer that's really handy, but right now so I'll probably use my heat tool or a hairdryer on low, just to help speed it along, but it's going to take some time to get that dry. But I have some other pieces I've made, and I thought you'd like to see what I've done. This is a piece of the twill fabric that I've done with cornstarch. As you can see, it's pretty thick and heavy. I'm really looking forward to trying this. Now, I want to show you this. I dried this between two pieces of towel, and I used an iron and my heat press. And guess what? bits of the towel. It was an old towel, but still. So that can go on the inside of a hat, and we're not going to worry about it. It'll probably come off when I get this moist anyway, but just a caution for you. Now, I did some buckram, some of the craft buckram at the same time, just as an experiment. So this is the original floppy stuff that I have. And here it is with the cornstarch. It's actually a lot more stiff, so I'm going to try that too. Okay, this is the first batch I did with the gum xanthan. This is the fabric, and as you can see, it's not entirely stiff. Here's a piece before being ironed and painted and everything. But, you know, it's not... You could use this, and this is what happens when you dry it outside in the Texas heat and wind, so be careful. You can use this as an interfacing in a garment, definitely. Here's the buckram, and I'm actually kind of impressed with how much more stiff that came out. It's not quite as stiff. Well, it's really close. It's not quite as stiff. This is the first batch of buckram that I did with the cornstarch, and this is with the gum xanthan. It's not quite as stiff, but I'm kind of pleased with it, really. Okay, so I accidentally let this stuff sit overnight, and I thought, well, I'll do a couple more to see what I get. The gum was a little bit thicker, so this is, you know, a little thicker. It's a little less pliable. It's hard to tell, but it is a little less pliable than what I had before. And the same with the buckram, and it's much more stiff. So I might try this on a tiny fascinator base just to see what I got. That's the plan. I have some head blocks up here, some cork head blocks that I'll be using to actually block this stuff. And let me see if I can bring one down. This is a cork head block. It's a size 22 inches. And what I'll do is cover this with plastic, and this is an old block. It's been very well loved and used, but I found it for like $10 and went, yes, please. I'll cover it with plastic, and then I will block the buckram over it, and I'll try and make a fast video of that so you can watch it. And that's going to be the next part of this. So I will be back with the blocked hats. Okay, I'm back, and I've got a bunch of these things blocked, and I'm going to pull the last of my hat pins out of here. Hat pins, haha, and so you can see what I've done. Now, I've blocked each of these, and before I removed it, hello hat pin, I ironed these just so they'd be perfectly flat. You iron it with a dry iron, because you don't want steam, because that'll activate the buckram and make it sticky again. It'll activate the starch. So I have marked the center front and the center back, and this is one of my patterns. So I used the same pattern on each of these so you could get an idea of what they were going to look like. So let me move this out of the way. Now, just for comparison purposes, this is something I need to reblock. It's a single piece of buckram, and it's kind of flimsy. So this is, I usually use two pieces, which this is a lot better. I blocked these on a bowl. I showed you that earlier. So, first thing we're going to look at is the two things that I did in cornstarch. You can hear this. It is stiff. This is the twill. It's really stiff, and I'm happy with it. This, for comparison, is some buckram I decided to stiffen with cornstarch. And it's pretty decent. It could do for a small fascinator. Compare it again to this stuff. I mean, this stuff's really floppy. This stuff's a lot less floppy. So, okay. Now, these are the ones I did in straight up xanthan gum. Yeah. This would make good interfacing. It really would. But I can't, use that for a hat unless I want just a little bit of body somewhere. This is a little more stiff, again, as compared to one layer of Buckram as compared to 2 layers of Buckram. It's about the same. So, I could save a little money and paint some Buckram with some xanthan gum. Now, I used some of the Twill with double strength xanthan gum. I wanted to see how that came out. And it's a little better as opposed to the one in single strength. It's got more body to it. It's more stiff. I could possibly use this as a hat form, as a hat base. This is one, I put the double strength gum on it and let it rest for a few days. It's not as stiff. I was kind of surprised. So, there you go. At some point, I will show you some hat. I'll make a hat out of one of these and I'll show you some hats. So, if I were going to do this again, and I probably will, I would soak in cornstarch and use either of these. So, but the only thing is, the cornstarch is a lot more of a pain to make because you have to cook it, you have to let it cool down and make sure it's not too thick, and yeah, it's a mess to make. So I would do that, and I would make up, I like to have some Buckram ready to go to block for fascinators, so I'd probably make up several pieces so they'd be all ready to go. So that is it, and I have a crooked camera, but thank you for joining me for the Buckram making experiments, and you can find me on Facebook. You can like and subscribe this video. I'd very much appreciate it. All the links will be below, so thank you very much.